Blue Beetle opened up this weekend. It doesn't look like things are going very well. We'll see what happens with that long term. We've also got Aquaman coming up. Before we get to the big Superman Legacy, Superman Reborn kind of reboot for the DCU under James Gunn, seemed like there was a lot of people excited about this, but I'm getting some bad vibes. I've got some bad juju around James Gunn. And here to talk to me about that is my good friend Aaron Sparrow. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing well, Wes. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Are you also getting bad vibes? Like, I understand James Gunn kind of put his reputation behind The Flash. Probably not the smartest move in the world, but I imagine David Zaslav kind of pushed him towards that. He's also said that Blue Beetle is really the first DCU character. I think that's a misstep, but it feels like he's lying a lot now.
It really does. It seems like we're getting a lot of contradictory information. It seems like things are coming out that, like the Henry Cavill thing, it's like, oh, well, he's too old for the role, because we're going to do a younger Superman. And now it's like, oh, I never said we were doing a young Superman, and it's like, wait, what is going on here? What is going on? And then you've got Gal Gadot coming out and saying, oh, yeah, I talked to him and Saffron. We're looking at doing Wonder Woman 3. And then they're coming out and saying, like, we never talked about Wonder Woman 3. And you're like, what the hell is going on at Warner Brothers Studios right now under James Gunn? What is happening?
Exactly. Let's talk about these in full. I got a couple of articles. James Gunn is making a Superman movie with a younger actor than former Man of Steel Henry Cavill, but that doesn't mean he's making a young Superman movie per se. The writer, director, and DC Studios co-chief took to Threads to clarify something that's been an assumption about Superman Legacy and the reason he shifted leads from Cavill to David Corenswet. A fan asked Gunn if his young Superman movie is set in the past. Gunn replied, I was never making a young Superman movie, just a Superman movie, which contradicts what Gunn wrote on Twitter in December. In the initial stages, our story will be focusing on an earlier part of Superman's life, so the character will not be played by Henry Cavill, basically stating, Henry Cavill's too old to play Superman because I'm going to have a younger version of Superman.
Mm-hmm. Earlier in his life, it's like, okay, so is it a younger Superman or is it not a younger Superman? You said it
and
was.
If it's not a younger Superman, then why isn't Henry Cavill the Superman? Since you're cherry picking all your other favorite actors to be in the goddamn roles.
This is just a complete cluster. And I don't think that the general public cares enough to figure out all the ins and outs of this new universe, what counts and what doesn't. I think it's pretty clear from the box office of the last several DC movies. Fans have just said, even your casual fans, your normies, your people who would maybe go see a superhero film that aren't, big comic fans, they've just said, you know what? I'm done with this. The movies aren't that great. I don't understand what's going on, and I can't be bothered to try to figure it out.
Like, I don't even understand where James Gunn is going with this. If you wanted to reboot everything, and you just wanted to start with a fresh, clean slate, across the board, then do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems weird to be hanging on. I'm going to cherry pick this, and I'm going to hang on to this, and I'm going to hang on to that. And of course, my wife still gets to be in it, and Peacemaker counts because I made that. Even though that the Zack Snyder Justice League shows up at the end, it's a mess. This whole thing is a mess from the very beginning. He's obviously, he had to either come in and try to fix what existed, or he had to come in and he had to wipe the slate clean and just start over. And this weird mishmash is not making anybody happy. It's not going to please anybody. And ultimately, I think that he's hobbled himself right out of the gate by doing that.
It appears that he's lying not only to the fans, but also to the actors as well. I remember, I'm sure you remember this as well, where he came out and said, I talked to Ben Affleck and he's very excited to potentially direct a Batman movie moving forward in the DCU. And then Ben Affleck's like, I would never do that. I don't want to have anything to do with Warner Brothers, DCU moving forward. Nothing against James Gunn, but I never even considered it. But then you almost had him confirming that it was under consideration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. All the news that we're getting, it's exhausting people. And, it's like, it's this, and then it's this. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Nobody cares anymore. That's the problem. It doesn't matter what you say at this point. People have checked out. And I think that this new Superman movie, I don't really see it doing that well. I don't care how good it looks. I don't care how much, for the most part, your average moviegoer has no idea who James Gunn is. They like the Guardians movies, but they don't really know who James Gunn is. And so his name being attached to the project doesn't put normie butts in the seats. It only puts James Gunn fans in the seats. So this movie's going to come out after a string of just terrible DC flops. Because remember, we still got Aquaman on the horizon. Even after Blue Beetle face plants at the box office, we've still got Aquaman just waiting to suck. So, this is the DC universe on film is cursed. It was cursed with a changing regime of idiot executives, and now there's just, I don't think there's any pulling up.
And the weird thing is, most of this isn't James Gunn's fault. Like, he didn't produce, he did not conceptualize Blue Beetle, Shazam, Black Adam. He didn't conceptualize, produce, and execute The Flash or any of this stuff. He's not the one that decided with Zack Snyder to launch this new shared universe and then midstream change it over to Joss Whedon, but then make it the Walter Hamada show where it's all going to be unconnected, but then it's all connected again. Like, he didn't make any of these really terrible decisions that have a lot of people down on the DCU himself, but then he's creating all these problems. As you mentioned earlier, Gal Gadot, despite recent comments from Gal Gadot claiming DC heads James Gunn and Peter Safran told her they would develop Wonder Woman 3 together, sources with knowledge of the situation tell Variety that is not the case. According to the source, a third Wonder Woman film is not in development at DC Studios, nor do Gunn and Safran have plans at this time for any Wonder Woman project in the new DC universe other than the previously announced Paradise Lost prequel series for Max. Can he not communicate with people? When you're the co-CEO of the studio, that means you're a leader. That means you have to be able to communicate with people. You can't have a sit-down meeting with Gal Gadot say, I love your portrayal of Wonder Woman, and maybe, perhaps in the future we can do Wonder Woman 3. We'll get it in development. And then when she goes away from the meeting, kind of thinking Wonder Woman 3 is a real possibility and is likely to be in production somewhat soon, be like, oh no, we never even talked about it.
Yeah, it's like, what impression are you giving this act? And I don't think that Gal seems like the sort of person that goes out and makes something up to try to make it happen. I think that she genuinely went away with the impression that, yeah, we're going to work on a Wonder Woman 3 idea. And then they're like, no, we never discussed that. And you're like, how is that possible? Who's in the wrong here? The truth must lie somewhere in the middle. You must have said something that led her along that path. And I feel like it's just, maybe James Gunn isn't a strong leader in the sense that he can't just come right out and say, no, we're not doing that. So he kind of strings people along a little bit, yeah, maybe potentially we could do that. But then they get it in their head that, yeah, we're doing it. And they go out and talk about it. And he's like, no, I don't know where that came from. Well, if you let them believe it, or if you led them along the path that maybe it could happen, you can't say I have no idea where this came from.
You have to take the director hat off and put the big boy co-CEO hat on, where you're the one making the final decisions. You no longer a guy yeah, I'll pitch that to the studio. You are the fucking studio now here. And you say, I don't know who's in the wrong. Maybe it's somewhere in the middle. Listen, it's 3 times now. With Henry Cavill, he's too old to play Superman. Turns out he's not making a young Superman movie. Ben Affleck is interested in coming aboard and directing a Batman movie in the DCU. Ben Affleck never even spoke about that. Gal Gadot comes away from a meeting. We're going to produce Wonder Woman 3 so I can continue playing the role moving forward. Never heard of it. There's one factor that's the same in all of them. James Gunn, dude, get your fucking house in order and be decisive and let people know what your plans are, because your word means a lot more now than it did just 7 months ago.
Yeah, we all admit that James Gunn inherited a tragedy, all right? They put a big steaming pile of crap in his lap. But everything that's happened since then has been on James Gunn. You're absolutely right. It's the buck stops, with the leader. And you're the leader. So what is going on? What are you telling people? What kind of meetings are you having where they're walking away thinking, or that you're walking away thinking that something's happening? Yeah, Ben Affleck definitely wants to direct a Batman movie. And then Ben Affleck comes out and says, I would never do that. It's not just
never under
we didn't
consideration
talk about it, or maybe I misunderstood. Maybe, it's no, we never discussed that. I would never do that. I have no interest in it. No, never.
He's also doing this weird thing. Eventually the MCU, not James Gunn's fault, it's more of a Kevin Feige thing. They started moving into more newer stories that they wanted to develop and translate to the big screen to continue on the MCU. Obviously, he would have been around that. And I'm sure that he's noticed that now that they've gotten out of the good stories that Marvel Comics have written, that they're into the Marvel Now, Marvel Legacy era of Marvel Comics, that the movies aren't very good.
All new, all different.
The source material is absolutely terrible. And the interest in the MCU itself has died down, but at least they had that heyday of 7 or 8 years where just everything is amazing. And then when he comes out with his plan of what the DCU is going to be and the source material for the stories, there's one thing that's kind of weird. Tom King's Superwoman, a Girl of Tomorrow, or Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. My bad. I got that one backed up. Which
you
isn't
you could just say True Grit and we'd be
that's the problem. It is a great story because True Grit is an amazing story, but it's almost like a scene for scene remake, especially on the earlier issues of it. But it never even mentions that it's an homage to another story that's already been told that was written by another creator. We've already had 2 True Grit movies. We've had a sequel to True Grit, Rooster Cogburn, that have already been done, and they're already absolutely amazing. So we're going to make a 3rd version of this movie so that we can adapt a Tom King book. And now he's talking about the next, I guess, thing that's set in modern times, like the next modern story he thinks is great. In a post shared on Twitter, Gunn wrote, Historia is a breathtaking work of sequential art and one of the best things to come out of DC and comics in the past few years. Thank you to Kelly Sue DeConnick, Phil Jimenez, Gene Ha, and Nicholas Scott for this incredible experience. The 3-issue series was published by DC's Black Label imprint from November 2021 to December of 2022. Historia, the Amazons, is described as a Homeric epic of the lost history of the Amazons and Queen Hippolyta's rise to power. Gunn's post comes shortly after a rumor emerged that hinted at the upcoming Wonder Woman prequel television series Paradise Lost, pulling inspiration from Historia. And I will admit, the Phil Jimenez art in the very first issue is breathtaking. I believe it's over-rendered in some areas, but it's certainly better than Kelly Sue DeConnick deserved for the story that was being told. But the real big problem with that book is it's not really Wonder Woman. It's reimagining everything about the character. Do we want a true, authentic Wonder Woman in the universe? Or do we want to go and say, well, we need a female author. Let's go with Kelly Sue DeConnick and pull up this absolutely bastardization of Wonder Woman and her history that wasn't a good fucking story to begin with.
Well, isn't that how Kelly Sue DeConnick got on Black Label anyway? Originally, Black Label was like, here's all these top shelf creators. And then people were like, you don't have any women. And they were like, so top shelf creators and Kelly Sue DeConnick.
John Ridley, yes.
Yeah, and John Ridley, and it just became like and then Black Label was dead. It just became a nothing brand. It's really troubling to me that James Gunn seems to think that the worst people writing comics today with the worst takes on characters, like Tom King, like Kelly Sue DeConnick, it really disturbs me that these are the people that he's praising, and it gives me no hope whatsoever for any future DC movies. If you look at the current slate and the current disaster and the current moves that he's making and the current things that he's saying, like coming out and praising The Flash as like the best superhero movie he's ever seen, and then you watch it and you go, this isn't even as good as your superhero movies. Like how, your Guardians movies, how can you possibly, praise this? And then he's praising Tom King and he's praising Kelly Sue DeConnick, and you just go, oh, this guy has no clue what good stories from these characters, good stories about these characters are.
Yeah, it becomes very sus. It's like, if that's what your taste in the history of these characters is, maybe, just maybe, despite all the lying and all that stuff, I could get over it. I don't even want to dip my toe in because you clearly don't have good taste in good stories and comic books.
Mm-hmm. Imagine looking at the entire history of a character like Supergirl or the entire history of a character like Wonder Woman, and the things that you pick out are Tom King and Kelly Sue DeConnick. Out of every creator that has ever had a run on those characters, that's who you say, oh, this is the top shelf stuff, man. This is what we need to be doing. It's the DC universe the DCU is already dead.
It really is in a lot of ways. There's so many things working against him. But I think at this point in time, the worst thing working against James Gunn is kind of James Gunn, because all the big issues that have come up over the past 6 months that don't have to do with the Flash and Blue Beetle and all these movies, Bobby, it's all James Gunn's doing. It's him lying or misconstruing the truth or not being honest with people. And you get all these stories out there, and it's always damage control. And then when he starts talking about where the future of the DCU is going to go, and you're going, nah, I don't want to go to Historia, the Amazons, which is absolute bullshit.
Who wants a Paradise Lost show on Max? Like, the fact that could even possibly be made, and I'm not convinced that it will be, because with as much money as Warner Brothers is losing, I can't imagine David Zaslav looking at that and saying like, yeah, that's where we want to put some money. But if it happens, like, just get ready to lose more money, Warner Brothers. Especially you're putting it on Max. No one cares. It's so depressing. I'm so tired of seeing everything that I love just bastardized and have an inferior product put out, and then it loses money, and then people lose faith in it. It used to be when I was a kid, and you'd hear that like maybe some property that you loved was getting a movie, you'd be kind of excited about it, and then you'd see it, and half of the time it would disappoint. But at least you had the half of the time when something good came out of it. The Transformers animated movie is awesome, even though it traumatized us all. The G.I. Joe animated movie, awesome. There's some good stuff there. But now you hear, hey, you like that property? And you're like, oh, I love that property. And they're like, Hollywood's making a movie about it. And you're like, oh God, please, no, don't. I'd rather you not. Could you just not? That would be better. You'll save money and I'll save heartache. Let's just not do it.
Aaron said something very interesting there at the end that I personally agree with, that the DCU under James Gunn might already kind of just be doomed to failure. A lot of things are outside of his control. We kind of talk about the things that he is in control of in this video. If you haven't seen this and you see how really bad it is and what he's really dealing with, there's a lot of failure on the horizon for James Gunn and the DCU. If you ask me, it's probably already dead. There's also a link in the video description.